11 players all at this World Cup right now. All disappointing almost everyone watching them. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you'll have a full lineup, and at least 2 of these names will genuinely surprise you. Every tournament builds its highlight reel around heroes, the comebacks, the records, the moments that get replayed for years. This is the other side of that same tournament. The side nobody wants to talk about until it's too late to fix. The names quietly sitting in group chats and post-match analysis shows getting picked apart while the stars around them get all the headlines. You know the feeling. Your team's biggest name walks onto the pitch, and for 90 minutes, you keep waiting for the moment that never arrives. You check the stats afterward almost in disbelief because the player on the pitch didn't look anything like the player you were promised. Let's build this team position by position, starting in goal, and I'll show you exactly why each name earned their place on this list. Thibaut Courtois starts in net. Belgium's golden generation came into this tournament for one last run together, and through 2 matches, they haven't found their attacking rhythm at all. A draw with Egypt, a goalless stalemate with Iran. Courtois has barely been tested because his own team can't create enough pressure to even force the opponent's goalkeeper into a difficult save. When your goalkeeper's biggest problem is boredom, that tells you everything about what's happening at the other end of the pitch. This is a manager who built his entire system around De Bruyne, Lukaku, and Courtois, 3 players in their 4th World Cup together, all of them now playing what could be their final tournament for their country. The plan made sense on paper. So far, on the pitch, it hasn't translated into goals. Could you find Belgium on a map without thinking twice? Of course you could. That's exactly why this hurts more. Everyone expected this golden generation's last World Cup to go out with fireworks, not silence. At the back, we need a defender from Uruguay, a former champion, one of only 8 nations to ever lift this trophy, drawing with debutantes Cape Verde, then failing to beat Saudi Arabia in a group many assumed they'd walk through. For a nation with that kind of history, slipping toward elimination against opponents nobody expected to even take points off them is the kind of result that gets replayed for years on Uruguayan television, picked apart frame by frame. Beside him, a defender from Brazil. 16 players in this squad are 28 or older, and experience is supposed to be the asset that carries a team through a long tournament. But age catches up eventually, and questions about pace at the back have followed this team into every match so far. The kind of quiet structural problem that doesn't show up on a scoreboard until it suddenly does, in the worst possible moment against the worst possible opponent. The 3rd defensive slot goes to Turkey. 62 shots across 2 matches, the most of any team in this entire tournament, and 0 goals. 0. More than half of those attempts came from outside the box, which tells its own story about a team that kept shooting from distance instead of working the ball into dangerous positions where it actually counts. You can dominate territory and still walk away with nothing, and that's precisely what happened to a Turkish squad many tipped as dark horses this summer, returning to the World Cup for the first time since 2002 with real expectations attached. This is the moment I promised you, because Turkey isn't just disappointing on the stat sheet. They're already eliminated. Beaten 2-0 by Australia, then beaten 1-0 by 10-man Paraguay, gone after just 2 matches in a format that was specifically expanded to make early elimination harder than it's ever been. 62 shots and 0 goals isn't bad luck repeating itself for 90 minutes twice in a row. At some point, that becomes a pattern, and patterns are exactly what separates disappointing from doom. Fairy tale collapse, or just a team that was never as good as the hype? Pick one in the comments, because both answers explain a different kind of disappointment. In midfield, we start with Arda Güler, Turkey's brightest individual talent, the player meant to drag this team through tight moments with one moment of magic when everything else stalled. Instead, he watched his country go home early. Despite carrying more of the attacking burden than almost anyone else on the roster, a young player left to shoulder a collapse that was never entirely his to fix alone. Next to him, Kevin De Bruyne, one of the greatest midfielders of his generation, playing what's almost certainly his final World Cup, the kind of farewell tour every football fan secretly hopes ends with one last unforgettable moment. Against Egypt, he hit the post in the 53rd minute after pushing an earlier shot just wide in the 7th. 2 real chances, 0 goals, and a Belgium side that needed something from their captain he simply hasn't delivered yet. Here's the second thing worth holding on to, because we'll come back to it. De Bruyne's manager said the entire team felt static in that first half. Too slow in transition, unable to find solutions even with the ball at their feet. That's not just one player's problem. That's a team built around aging brilliance that hasn't found its rhythm when it matters most. most. We've all felt this watching our own team's legend get one more shot at glory and just miss it by inches. It's a specific kind of heartbreak watching quality and class without the finishing touch to match it. The third midfield spot goes to Alexis Mac Allister. Argentina haven't refreshed this squad as much as some expected heading into this tournament, largely the same core that lifted the trophy 4 years ago, just 4 years older, and without some of the valuable veteran presence that held the midfield together. The underperformance from key midfielders has been a real concern even as Messi continues to produce moments of brilliance almost entirely by himself, carrying a disproportionate share of the creative burden for a defending champion. Right beside him, Rodrigo de Paul completes the midfield. Same team, same concern, same pattern of a player who's been central to Argentina's identity for years, suddenly looking a step behind the tempo he used to dictate, when the engine room of the defending champions isn't humming the way it did 4 years ago. Even a generational talent up front can only paper over so much for so long before it starts showing in the results. Subscribe right now if you want more lists like this one, because this channel doesn't just chase the headlines everyone else is writing. We dig into the stories underneath the score. Up front, Romelu Lukaku starts as our first striker. Belgium's all-time leading scorer arrived at this World Cup having played barely an hour of competitive football all season because of injury. His manager openly admitting before the tournament that 64 minutes across an entire campaign doesn't bode well for a World Cup. He came off the bench against Egypt and created a goal within 23 seconds without even touching the ball himself. His presence alone dragging a defender into an own goal, which says everything about the physical threat he still carries even out of shape. But a striker who can only contribute in bursts off the bench isn't the focal point a team needs for a deep run through 7 matches, and that tension between what Lukaku still has and what his body can currently give isn't close to being resolved. Belgium are essentially gambling an entire tournament on a player getting fitter as the weeks go by, and gambles like that don't always pay off in time. The second striker spot belongs to a forward from Senegal. They haven't even played badly, and that's exactly what makes this so cruel. A narrow loss to tournament favorites France, competitive for long stretches, then a defeat to an Erling Haaland-powered Norway side that's been brushing past almost everyone in its path this tournament. And somehow Senegal are sitting with 0 points despite competing in nearly every phase of both matches, generating chances, controlling spells of play that simply didn't translate onto the scoreboard. Did you know it's now mathematically impossible for them to finish in the top 2 of their group, one of African football's most respected nations, a side that's produced some of the most exciting talent on the continent for over a decade, eliminated from automatic qualification before their final group match has even been played. Their only realistic path now runs through the 3rd place rank, needing other results to fall their way just to keep this tournament alive. That's the cruelest version of disappointment in football. Not playing badly, playing well enough to deserve more, and still walking away with nothing to show for it. And the final forward slot goes to Ecuador. They need to beat Germany, a side that scored 7 goals in their own opener and hasn't shown any sign of slowing down since, in their final group match just to survive into the knockout rounds. Talent has never been the question with this squad. They've shown flashes of real quality in patches of both matches so far. Consistency against the very best for 90 full minutes rather than 20 has been the problem. And now they're being asked to find that consistency against the most ruthless attacking team left in the entire group stage. It's the kind of must-win game that defines how a nation remembers an entire World Cup campaign, win or lose, regardless of what happened in the matches before. So there's your 11. A goalkeeper bored out of his mind because his own attack can't create a threat. A backline built on faded reputations and aging legs. A midfield full of household names who haven't delivered when their teams needed them most. And a front 3 stitched together from injury, bad luck, and table position cruelty that has nothing to do with how they actually played. Do any of these 11 turn it around before this tournament ends? Commit to a name right now in the comments, and let's check back in 2 weeks to see who actually changed their story and who didn't. 11 players, all disappointing almost everyone who expected more from them heading into this summer. And yet football has a habit of rewriting these stories in the final third of a tournament, the same way it always has, the same way it probably will again before this World Cup is finished. Reputations get rebuilt in a single half. Careers get redefined by one moment nobody saw coming. Some of these names might be unrecognizable a month from now for entirely different reasons than the ones that put them on this list today. And speaking of stories getting rewritten, one player on this This exact list just had the kind of comeback that should terrify the rest of this tournament. 48 hours ago, he was being written off entirely. You won't believe how fast it happened and how completely it flipped his entire World Cup. It's on your screen right now, so go tap it before you do anything else.